I think that too many of us come into the relationship thinking about our role as a grandparent and not about our relationship as a grandparent.
Mm.
And the relationships are really the primary thing.
Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. And midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. And welcome to episode 158 of the podcast. Now, if you are a long-time listener of the show, you'll know that I talk about a wide range of transitions that occur during midlife. But there's one transition that I haven't ever covered or spoken about. And perhaps it's because it is a long way off for me and I'm just very selfishly haven't covered that. But I know it's one that so many women will experience. And that's a transition to becoming a grandmother. Now, this is a stage of life that is like no other, and it's one that can bring enormous amounts of joy, but it's also one that can be fraught with some potential problems if you aren't aware. Now, there's so much information and advice for new parents these days, especially compared to when we were new parents, but there's very little for grandparents. So to help with that gap, today I've invited expert DeeDee Moore to help us work through this topic further. And she will guide and give us many helpful hints and sage advice. Now, DeeDee founded her business, More Than Grand, to help new grandparents become the village that new parents need. Her insight and her resources make this sometimes tricky transition much smoother for the whole family. On the More Than Grand blog and through social media, DeeDee covers topics such as concrete ways to support new parents, understanding new trends in childcare, and also meaningful ways to connect with grandchildren. We've got so much that we can chat about today. So without further ado, I would like to welcome DeeDee, who is joining us today all the way from her home state in Idaho in the US. Welcome, DeeDee.
Thank you so much, Jo. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to your listeners about this, as you said, kind of sometimes tricky transition.
It is a tricky transition, I can imagine, because I haven't gone through it personally. I'm really interested in hearing what you're saying so I can be more prepared if and when that ever happens for me. But I also know so many of my own friends, my sisters, they're all going through this transition. So it is going to touch a lot of the listeners. And I suppose, DeeDee, there's a wide range of ages that we're talking about. I mean, some people become grandparents in their 40s, some in their 50s, and some
Yes.
in their 60s. So it's a wide range.
Yes, absolutely. The average age, at least in the US, the average age someone becomes a grandparent is 50.
Huh.
So again, that's an average. It ranges from, the 35-year-old who discovers her 15-year-old is pregnant to someone who's in their 70s.
Yes.
But for most women, it does happen in your 50s or 60s. And that's a time of life when all sorts of other transitions are happening. So it can be very, very difficult to navigate because you are trying to figure out a lot of other things as well, and you have competing responsibilities.
Yeah. And we've spoken a lot about transitions, as I said, on this podcast before. So throwing in the role of grandparent would be, I imagine, tricky for some people. But before we get into our conversation, I'd really love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you did before you got into your current work today.
Well, I was a stay-at-home mom for a very long time. My husband was in the military and we had 4 children. So I stayed home and provided the stability while he was going off around the world. Um, but I now have 3 grandchildren. I worked when my youngest children got into school. I started working as a receptionist, an office lady, and then ended up with a career in communications. I worked as a communications consultant for quite some time and retired from that when about the same time my first grandson was born. After I retired, I lasted about a month before I got really bored and needed to find some sort of project to keep my creative juices flowing. So I started a blog about grandparenting because it was very much on my mind, and I couldn't find any resources on the internet that really focused on new grandparents. It felt like that was something that was missing. So I spent a lot of time on parent forums and Grandsnet and just listening to what people were talking about, what they were having troubles with, so that I could find things to write about on my blog. And I quickly discovered there was this big disconnect between what parents were experiencing with grandparents and what grandparents were understanding their role was. There
Mm.
seemed to be a lack of communication about what parents really needed from grandparents. So I thought, this would be a really useful thing for my blog to cover. How can I help new grandparents understand the things that parents really want them to know? And that's what I've been doing.
So, DeeDee, was the conversation, did that start through people who were responding to your various blog posts, or was this just in conversation that you had with your own network?
It was a little bit of both. A lot of it was, I went on these forums like Reddit and Mumsnet and Grandsnet to see what problems people were having so that I could create content that would speak to what they were experiencing.
Mhm.
And that was really helpful to see what worried people, what they were struggling with, and so that I could create blog posts that would help them with those things.
Yeah, right. And once again, it just shows or goes to show that your skills and a woman's skills that you might have had earlier can be used in a different way. Nothing is wasted. And I just love hearing that you came as a communicator and you're still to this day using those skills.
Absolutely. And that's the bottom line in this relationship between parents and grandparents. It's communication. And I really try to get the point across to women who are becoming grandmothers for the first time that there are things you need to talk about with parents. You can't just go in with your rosy picture of what you think this is going to be like, which it may be. And we all there are things that we all look forward to as grandparents,
Mm,
but you need to take into account the reality of what parents are dealing with today,
yeah.
and your desire to spoil your grandchild is probably going to cause trouble down the line.
Yes. Well, I'm really curious then, what sort of grandmother did you envisage that you were going to be? And did your dream of what you thought, did that match the reality of what you have become?
Well, I'm one of those grandparents who was not quite ready for the role, and I think that's very, very common because we don't feel like we're old enough to be a grandmother when we become one in our 50s. Um, I also had became a grandmother the day after my youngest child graduated from high school. So I hadn't had any years of empty nest waiting for those grandbabies to arrive.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, I hadn't really thought about what it would be like to be a grandmother. I did know that I really was excited about seeing my son become a father.
Hmm.
He had always been a very nurturing person and had always had a flock of children following him, whether it was younger siblings, younger cousins, neighbors. So I knew that this was a role that he was destined for, and it was very exciting to me to get to watch that.
Ah. And you touched on it in what you said earlier, that this stage of life for a new mum is very different to what we experienced as mothers when we had our own children. So therefore, the role of the grandmother in turn does need to be a little different.
Yeah.
And it's that big transition. And you talked about it then that you didn't feel like you were ready to be a grandma because,
Yes.
5 minutes ago, your children were babies. So how can it be that
Right.
your own children are having children? Good God, that's hard to get your head around. So it's a big
Exactly.
reality check. How do a lot of women work through that mix of emotions of, yes, you're excited at the prospect, but oh my God, it's just showing and highlighting the fact that life is moving on.
Life is moving on. It's at an accelerated pace.
Mm.
We really do need to pause and think about that. I think that for me, one of the most powerful things that I did early on as a grandparent, I was encouraged by another grandparent to write a grandparent vision statement. And it just sounded ridiculous. It just absolutely did. But when I kept getting pushed, and when I finally took the time to think about what my purpose as a grandparent was, and when I framed it that way, it gave me some clarity about what it was that I wanted to pass on, what it was that I wanted to share, how I wanted to approach this new family. And that has been a very helpful guide to me as I've navigated this role.
Yeah. I think that changing the words to reframe it slightly different, because to me, when I hear a grandparent vision statement, it sounds like a birth plan. And you go, well, you know how that can sometimes go. The best
Yeah.
laid intentions can sometimes be thrown out the window. So given that, what did you see as your purpose, as you know, from your own personal point of view?
Yeah. Yeah. My number one purpose was to support this new family
Mm.
and to help them in whatever way I could. Number two was to make sure that they always knew how much I loved them and that, that they could feel that. And
Yeah.
then the third thing on there was to broaden their horizons, introduce them to new places, new ideas, show them birds' nests and take them on trips someday, perhaps. But they're books. There are all sorts of ways to broaden their horizons. So
Mm.
that was the third thing that I wanted to do was give them an appreciation for the greater world.
Mm. And so, do you encourage then, DeeDee, for other grandmothers or to be soon to be grandmothers, grandparents, to think about that more deeply?
I do. And one reason is this. The messages that we're getting about grandparenting from popular culture are all about spoiling our grandkids.
Well, that's so
They are
true.
all, yeah, they are all about, spoil them and send them home. Grandma's house, grandma's rules. And those are really toxic messages. And when you ask any grandparent what they want their legacy to be, it's not that they want their legacy. They're not going to say that they want to make sure that that child has every toy they ever wanted,
Yeah.
or that they were the ones who snuck them sugar all the time. That's not what any of us really want, and yet that's how too many grandparents behave. So if you take the time to set out that intention in the beginning, it can help you cut through the noise of what's being fed at you when you open up Facebook or, go to the grandparent section of a gift store with the mugs and the little signs for your house.
Yeah, yeah, that's great advice. And keeping to the on the advice track, it'd be fair to say that the drive then to stay young and look after your health and your wellness so you can keep up with your grandchildren must be a big driver and motivator for many women.
Absolutely. And it should be because it is so wonderful to be able to get down on the floor with them and get up again, right?
Yes.
And that's something that you begin to lose naturally as you age, unless you practice it over and over again.
Mm.
When that child is up on the climbing structure at the playground and they hurtle themselves off into your arms, you want to be careful, fit enough to catch them and not have both of you go crashing to the ground. So it's
Yes.
really important to stay fit for those little ones because they get big really fast. And it's quite exhausting to be around them if you aren't in good shape. It's
Mm.
exhausting to be around them even if you are in good shape, but it certainly helps to make sure that you're prioritizing your wellness and your health.
And that's like we were talking about earlier then, DeeDee, that grandparenting in today's world, it looks very different to past generations.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you picture what your mother was like or mother-in-law was like, and how you might want to then take on that role. So women, and we talked about this it's at a time of life when we're juggling careers, maybe where you didn't get the opportunity, but that little bit of independence from having an empty nest.
I skipped that.
But then you've also got some women who'll be in the role of caregiving, still perhaps their own children who could be at home with their own parents who are aging. What do you see as some of the really big changes and then perhaps challenges that grandmothers of this era that you and I are in right now are facing?
I think you've named them all. And one thing that, with lifespans being longer, we are, whether we are chronologically younger or not, we are younger than our grandparents were, right? We are much more active, whether we're still working. We are more likely to have an aging parent that we're taking care of because their lifespan is longer.
Mm.
So we really are juggling a whole lot more. Another thing that's different today is that parents today, because they have so much information coming at them all the time from the internet, from social media, are far more worried about doing it right.
Yeah.
I think for most of us, we certainly worried whether we were making the right decisions, but it wasn't something that was on our minds all day, every day. And I do think that most parents today are constantly worried that they're doing something wrong. I mean, what you have to be feeding your child, when you're supposed
Mm.
to be sleep training them, and what do you vaccinate? Do you not vaccinate? I mean, there's so much coming at them all the time, and it's very, very stressful to be a parent today. Grandparents have to recognize that
Yeah.
and not add to that stress by coming in full force. I'm excited to be a grandparent. Here's what I'm going to do. I don't care about your rules and boundaries. I just have, I'm just going to come in and do what I want to do.
Yeah.
So that is another big difference that we as we become grandparents need to be able to navigate.
Oh, that's so true. And when I think about it, my biggest things were, yes, I had my friends around me who might have gone through motherhood. I've had my own family members who went through the process. But apart from that, there was no social media as far as I've done,
Right.
because Facebook wasn't around. It was what to expect when you're expecting, what to expect in the first
Yep.
year. They were like the Bibles. But apart from
Yes.
that and the odd parenting book, there really wasn't the whole, it's a
Mm.
mummy influencer
Yeah,
type social media
exactly.
influencers that are around right now that these poor young mums are trying to compare themselves
Oh,
to. So yeah, it would be a lot of pressure.
it's very hard. And one of the things that has happened because of that is parents are much less likely to look to grandparents for advice,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
which can be a very hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
If, I know I certainly went to my mom if I was worried about something,
Mm.
because as you said, we had a couple of books. Maybe we had our pediatrician was available for the major things, but for the most part, we asked a friend who'd had a baby, or our mothers, or mother-in-law, or maybe even our grandmother. But today's parents are not as interested in the advice of the women who came before because they can just go to Google and get the answers that they need.
That's such a great point. Yes. And it would be something that would come, mm, unless you were really aware of it and was pointed out to you, you could see where that
Mhm.
some friction could perhaps happen, which
Yes.
okay, so let's talk about that then, because that's just something that we're evolving the conversation. The family dynamics change and shift with the arrival of a newborn anyway. And so you're navigating, well, new families are navigating that. So you've got the in-laws as well. So you've got the spider web is getting larger, and that circle is getting larger. So where do you advise people can begin in for their preparation to avoid any of these potential problems or conflicts that could arise? Because it's a very
Yeah,
high probability, if you're not aware, that
absolutely.
something could happen.
Absolutely. I recommend you go to my website, obviously.
Yes, which will be in the show
I
notes. So everything that we're talking about today will be in the show notes where people
Yes.
can go to.
And
Yep.
you start with communication is what you start with. I did create a whole guide for new grandparents that's full of information and conversation starters so that they can come into the role prepared. It's more of a relationship shift than you expect. I mean, this is your child, right? You know how to navigate this person.
Mm.
But when your daughter becomes a mother or your son becomes a father, they're becoming a different, they're taking on a new identity, and you need to learn new ways of interacting with them, new ways of speaking with them, new ways of communicating with them, because there is that very different dynamic. A lot of people are not ready for that, but communication is the answer.
Yeah. What if there is a block? Or let's say, for an example, we won't use the block. Before you were talking about, it's a great idea to prepare in advance. So, to start to think about how the relationships will change and morph. And, over time, you'll find a new normal again. But what say you've been, that's great for a person or a mum, grandmother who's about to take on this new role. What about for somebody who's been in that role for a while? Things are sticky and you want to reestablish maybe a different type of relationship going forward or new boundaries. Where do you begin then or there?
Well, again, you start with communication, but it is really, the longer it happens, the harder it gets.
True.
And I know a lot of times the trouble begins between the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law, a tale as old as time,
Mm.
but it's too many grandmothers, mothers do not take the time to establish their own relationship with a daughter-in-law outside of the partnership with their son or daughter. It's imperative that you recognize that she's an important part of your family from the beginning and establish your own relationship with her. Get to know her as a person and not just as an extension of your own child, and find ways to, show her that you want her to be part of your family, that you include her, and that you don't consider her an outsider. That's something that will pay off when grandchildren come along. And it's something that will pay off should that partnership ever end. And you see that a lot with divorces where the daughter-in-law gets full custody of the child,
Mm.
and suddenly the father's parents no longer get to see their grandchild, or it's very, very limited time. So embracing that relationship, cultivating it, and making sure that you have a strong relationship. And it's never too late to start that. It may take longer if you're coming in from, after years of a prickly daughter-in-law, it may take longer to establish a good relationship, but you can. I always recommend family counseling if it's something that is you've worked on and can't come to some sort of agreement. It'd be wonderful if you could go together, but even just going to some sort of counselor, therapist, confidant to learn ways to interact with her, or him. I mean, it could be the son-in-law that's harder to get along with, or
Mm.
your own child for that matter. I mean, sometimes there are long-standing relationship problems that have never been resolved, and I highly recommend finding professional help for some of those.
Yes. And family dynamics, there are so many versions of what a family can look like now, aren't there?
Right.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's
Right.
always been there, but it's even more so now. Given that you've got blended families, that can happen. Um, is that something that you've also noticed can be a bit of a challenge if all of a sudden you've got your child has remarried and then there's children that suddenly other children have appeared with it. Is that something
Yes.
that you've
It
noticed as
can
well?
be a It can be a big problem. One thing that I have heard from parents and grandparents is, the idea that these step grandchildren aren't really your grandchildren. And so you don't need to give them the same, value Christmas present that you give your grandchildren. This happens, and it's heartbreaking because you know who notices that?
Oh,
The kids.
yeah.
Absolutely. So, if you have more than one grandchild, whether they are a step grandchild, a borrowed grandchild, your favorite son's children or your daughter you don't get along with children, you treat all your grandchildren equally
Mm,
because they notice, and that's something they will carry with them forever.
yes. Yeah, that's very good. I wouldn't have ever thought that people would do that, but clearly, clearly people do. So, can you speak to giving listeners some advice on how they might be able to handle different values, different parenting styles that come up? And because this is something obviously for many families that will happen, and particularly across different cultures, because there's going to be different styles from different cultures as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a really tricky one because we have our own idea of what worked with our children or didn't. And we can watch our adult children doing things that we just are pretty sure aren't going to be a good thing in the long run. Um, and we just have to let them make their mistakes. If there's a cultural difference, you have to be very, very respectful of the fact that this new family is creating their own culture. And it's not up to you what that culture looks like. The best thing you can do is be open to learning about how they're raising their children. You can't try to dictate holiday traditions or religion or any of those things that may be vitally important to you, but every family creates its own culture. And I say that's true whether you're marrying somebody from a different faith or a different country or the boy next door. I mean,
Mm.
you're going to have different things that are important to you than that new family does. So your job is to be curious about it, embrace it, and accept that it's not up to you how that culture is formed.
Yes, and I assume it would be very difficult to sometimes hold your tongue, but it's just like as your
Yes.
children get when they become less dependent on you and into teenagers and young
Yes.
adults, it's just watching something they've got to learn sometimes maybe the harder way
Yes.
even,
Yes.
or it could be a better way. I mean, there's nothing to say that that
Exactly.
way is the best way as well, because we've only got our own experience to draw from.
Mhm. And that is so true. And it's something that I mean, it's human nature to think our way is the best
Yes,
way.
it is. Yeah, yeah.
But we have to accept that parents are the ones that are in charge at this point, and they get to choose what the best way is.
Mm. And I suppose it's just patience, isn't it, to let things
It is.
unfold. And have you come across parent, and if we keep on that thread, then if there's differing values, that some grandparents, grandmums, or whoever it may be, that they, when they've got the grandchildren within their fold, they're coming to stay, and there's just an influence, right? I've got them now. I'm going to be able to show them this way. Does that sometimes happen?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. And
And
that can
again,
be
human
very
nature.
positive.
Yeah.
Right. And it can be very positive. I mean, you can teach them wonderful things, but you need to really um, respect what parents value. And so, I always bring up religion because that can be a really big one between an older generation and a younger generation. If that's something that you really want to pass on to your grandchildren, going back to that grandparent purpose, that grandparent vision statement, you need to run that by parents because that is not yours to decide. You don't get to decide you're taking them to church on Sundays. You don't get to decide that, there's going to be a Bible reading every night before bed, or you're going to, teach them all of the prayers for, the Sabbath. It's up to parents to decide if that's something they want done. they may be completely open to it, but you have to have that conversation.
Mm, yep. Particularly if you do know what their stance is on something. Like if you know that
Yeah,
it's going to be something that will be, the opposite of what they're instilling in their children and that they're
right.
upholding within their own family unit. Yeah, it could be that could be a very divisive power
E-
play.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's something that is very hard for some grandparents. I wouldn't say a lot of grandparents, but
Mm,
we're used to being the authority in this relationship. And some grandparents have a lot of trouble giving that up when their children become parents.
yeah.
They still feel like they're the authority and should be treated as such, when in reality, they're not anymore. The parents are now the parental authority, and you and your adult children are more like equals. So they no longer have to follow your lead, follow your rules, and, do what you want them to do.
Yeah, that would be hard, I imagine, for some
Yeah.
people to deal with.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
and that's the inner work for for us as being the
Yes.
older, wiser person in the relationship as well.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
it's really bugging you, dig deeper. What is it about that is really
Right.
rubbing?
Right.
Yeah,
And that's again, if you're continuing to have conflicts with the parents of your grandchildren, it's a good idea to go find someone to help you work through that, because
yeah.
there's probably something going on inside yourself that needs work on. It's probably not really the relationship between you and the others. It's probably something deep in you that needs some work.
Yes. So, DeeDee, you spoke about before that the fact that there is so much information out there, like there's a saturation of information where today's parents are being bombarded, left, right, and centre. So, what is the best way to handle giving or sharing advice without being seen as pushy or you've got having the answers? I mean, you'd be treading a fine line.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think that the best thing to do is ask. I remember when, Michael was a baby and I was having the same problem with him. Would you be interested in hearing what I did?
Mm,
That gives them the option to say, "No, I've got it handled," or "Sure, go ahead and tell me this useless information."
yeah, yeah.
But it puts the ball in their court. Always ask. I mean, most of the time parents have a plan. They've got something they think they're going to do. But if you come to it as a source of possible information for them, knowing that they are the authority on their child, they're much more likely to be open to it.
Yes. That's so simple, isn't it? Just ask. But
Yeah,
it's probably something
absolutely.
that
Just ask.
doesn't occur a lot of the time because you're wanting to
No,
share, you're wanting to help. The
you
thought to
want to
ask,
help.
would you like it, just doesn't come into the equation. But that is a really
Right.
simple, just a slight
Yeah.
change for people to.
Yeah.
And also, Dee, when we had our pre-chat meet when we met together before to talk about the conversation we're going to have today, you also mentioned, if there is something that you're not quite in agreement with, or you want to stay abreast to learn more about what the new parents that the family is interested in.
Right.
That can be a big help, and also learn some of the new laws, legislations that may be in. So you're up
Yes.
to date as far as car safety seats and things. I know we spoke about that. So do you want to talk a little bit
Yeah.
more on that topic for us?
It is so helpful if parents don't have to educate you on what's new in baby care and safety. And there's a lot that's new. I know just I have my four children are spread out over about 13 years. And so my first two were born in the 1980s, and my second two were born in the 1990s. And there was a huge shift in recommendations just between my two sets of children. I had to learn everything all over again.
Mm.
That has been compounded now, 30 years later. And so we really don't know a lot about what is recommended today. I think any new grandparent should go to parents and say, "Hey, where are you getting your information on child wellness? Where are you getting your information on sleep safety? Can you send me some resources so that I can learn more about it and be on the same page and you don't have to teach me anything? And that's one of the things that I offer in my new grandparent essentials courses, and I update it every year with modern baby care and safety, and also parenting trends, because there are a lot of things that are new today that, when we fed our children, we started with rice cereal and moved on to vegetable purees and then
Oh, so it's
purees. I mean,
different.
it was
What's happening now?
so now there's this thing called baby-led weaning, where they literally just hand the child chunks of food, and there are no more purees, and they try to get them 100 foods before they're a year old, 100 different foods before they're a year old. And it's very different. And you may walk in with your and see your grandchild with a strip of steak in his little 8-month-old hand, and just gasp. So there are a lot of things that we were unaware of, and unless we take the time to learn about them now,
Yeah.
we're it's gonna be a little harder for parents to have us around.
Mm. But what a great way, and again, this is where your skills as a communicator comes into play, is just to ask, be curious, and there's that word curious again. Ask,
Yes,
what do I need to know? Tell me, point me in the right
yes,
direction, so I'm prepared as well. That would do a
yes,
lot, I would imagine,
it does.
for a relationship.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that too many of us come into the relationship thinking about our role as a grandparent and not about our relationship as a grandparent.
Mm,
And the relationships are really the primary thing. And it's the relationship with parents that really is going to drive your experience as a grandparent, because you can't have a lovely, warm relationship with your grandchildren if parents are trying to keep you at an arm's distance because you are constantly making their life harder.
yes, yes. DeeDee, and I imagine it's exactly the same in most Western countries. So I'm talking from an Australian to an American right now. In Australia, there are grandparents are used a lot in probably as not a caregiver, say a caregiver, so both parents can go
Sure.
to work, because the cost of daycare and providing that care for the child during the day before their school age is enormous.
Yes.
How do grandparents who want to help, because you do want to help your children out, because you know the
Right.
expense, the financial burdens that will be,
Right.
but you don't want to also use all of that time caring for your grandchildren, because you might like to do, which is not being selfish, you might like to do something else. You've just gone from a role of being a parent to now your role of grandparent, but in slash you're the parent for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day.
Ex it is just as hard here in the US as it is in
Okay.
Australia and in
I
in the
assume
UK
so.
as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's hard. And I know, on my website, one of the top search terms that brings people to my website is grandparent babysitting burnout.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
And that would be the case.
it's hard. And
Mm.
a lot of these people, a lot of these women, and it's almost always the women. Yes, there are grandfathers too that are pitching in, but it's much rarer for them to be the sole caregiver, daytime caregiver, than it is for a grandmother. We've we've raised our kids. We've had our careers. We retired, and we thought that the book club and the we were finally going to take up watercolors and get back to that novel that we started in our 20s. And no, now we are caregiving 40 hours a week and are absolutely, utterly exhausted.
Mm.
It's really important for grandparents to go into that arrangement with a very clear plan. You've got to talk to parents about what happens if you get sick. What happens if you discover that you just physically cannot do this? What happens if you want to go on a trip
Mm.
and can't be there for a couple of weeks? How are you going to navigate all these things that you would you would navigate with if they were hiring a nanny, that you need to have those same conversations. Who's in charge of preparing the meals? Who's in charge of cleaning the house? Are they going to be coming to your house, and will they be bringing food and toys, or how is all that going to work? You need to have a really clear plan in place and a plan for check-ins as well.
Mm.
Every month, every 6 weeks, every quarter, whatever. How is this going? What can we do to, where are the problems? What needs to change? What's going well? So
Yeah.
it's important to go into it very intentionally and very thoughtfully, because it is a huge commitment, and we are not as young as we used to be.
Yes.
I know I took care of my three grandchildren who were 3, 5, and 7 at the time. My daughter-in-law was very ill. And so I went in and was at their house on and off for about 6 weeks. And after about the third day that I was there, she was in bed. She couldn't leave her room. My son was working and trying to do what he could, but he couldn't not work. And about the third day of preparing breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, doing dishes 5 times, keeping the laundry going, keeping the kids, getting the kids to school, and I thought I was going to die. I mean, I was literally exhausted to the bone. And I called my husband and I said, I don't think I'm coming home any soon. I need you here because I can't do
Yes.
this by myself.
Yes. It is meant, and
Yes.
you do forget, don't you? And I know when my friends,
Oh, you
sisters would say, I'm just exhausted. And you do forget.
you forget how nonstop it is when there
Yeah.
are little children in the house. It is
Yes.
just nonstop.
Yeah. Yeah. So then let's talk about that. That's sort of one aspect of grandparenting. When you are a caregiver for, that you're the primary caregiver, basically, so mum and dad can go off to work. How do we then, for the grandparents who might have their grandchildren living in a different part of the country or perhaps overseas, and the times that they get to see their grandchildren is so limited? I don't know, things are so different now to, again, when we were parents. What sort of things do you suggest grandmums can do?
Yeah, it's so much easier than it used to be. I mean, FaceTime is a miracle for grandparents. I don't know what its other uses might be, but for grandparents, it's
Yes.
amazing. Um, but you know, keeping in touch through letters, through you know, messages that you send with Marco Polo or another app, so that you are letting them know that you're thinking of them is huge. So that when you do have the opportunity for those visits, they have an idea who you are. They'll be surprised to see how much bigger you are than that little person in their phone, in mom's phone, but it's you need to keep that connection going in the in-between times. Don't try to go in for that visit and make up for lost time. Keep things simple. Don't try to, if they're coming to you, don't plan parties so all your friends can see your grandchildren. Don't plan to take them to every amusement in town. Don't, plan lavish dinners. Just keep things simple. And that goes when you visit them as well. Don't assume that you are going to be spending every waking moment with them. That's not good for either of you.
Yes. Yeah.
There is a wonderful website called the longdistancegrandparent.com, and she has amazing resources for grandparents who are grandparenting from a distance. And I'll give you a link to put in the show notes as
Yes.
well,
Thank you.
because it is just she's a fabulous, fabulous resource.
Yeah. See, there is information out there, but it's knowing, isn't it? It's knowing that there is.
It's knowing it's
Yeah.
hard to find. It's hard to
Yeah.
find. And I think it's growing. I think that more people are looking for the information and it's
Yeah.
getting easier to find. But who would think to look for a website for
Well, that's
grandparents,
right.
right? We'd think
I
we know
know.
what it's going to be. We
That's
think we're
it.
going to walk into this role
Yeah.
and
And you know,
and not
what you're
have any
not going to
issues.
be like and what you are going to be like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so true. So we kind of touched on it earlier, the issue of split families. So how
Mm.
then do we keep that connection open when there is that split? a divorce or a separation? Is it again
Right.
a matter of asking what is the best way, like, because it can be very
Yes. Yeah,
fractious.
I
It's
think
a very,
absolutely.
every situation would be different.
Sure. Every situation is definitely different. A lot of it depends on how acrimonious that split is. A lot of it depends on what your relationship was with your child's partner before the split.
Mm.
Um, it depends on whether there's a new geographic distance between you. I'd say what you want to do is focus on two things. One is continuing to be supportive of both parents. And that may be hard to be supportive of someone who has really hurt your child or someone whose life choices you don't agree with,
Mm.
but doing things to let them know that you still want to be a part of their life, that you still want to be supportive in whatever ways you can, will go a long way. And the other is to continue reaching out to those children. They may be old enough to for you to be able to spend time with them independently. They may be old enough to, have a phone and be able to text back and forth. They may be too young for that, and your best bet is to send them letters, send them little note cards with stickers, send them little things in the mail to stay a part of their life.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it would be tricky for many people, I should imagine, when that
Yes.
happens.
Yes.
Before we move on, is there any other hot topic that we haven't spoken about? Because we have covered
Oh
quite
my
a bit.
gosh.
Is there anything that you can think of that would be really important for sharing with the listeners?
I think we've covered a lot, most of it. Again, I think the most important things for grandparents to remember are how different parenting is today and how important it is for you to recognize that as you become a grandparent so that you can really support parents in the ways they need.
Mm.
And and again, prepare. It is most people who are grandparents will tell you it is one of the greatest roles of their lives. And yet it is a role we don't prepare for.
Mm.
We wouldn't go into a new job after not working for 30 years in the industry and say, I did this 30 years ago. I'm fine. You don't need to give me any instructions.
Yeah,
Just let me get going.
yeah. I think the
You
greatest
can't.
reminder, DeeDee, is when you do spend time and you'd be absolutely exhausted because you have forgotten. You go, well, there's a reality check for me.
Yes, that is so true. That is so true.
Yeah,
So yes, prepare for it
yeah,
and it's the more preparation you put in, the more intention you put in, the more rewarding the experience is.
yeah. And the grandparents, grandmums that I speak to, friends, family, they just love this stage of life. So this is a great opportunity then to see the world through, I suppose, new eyes, and
Yes.
as a way to reflect. How's that played out in your own life?
Oh, it's so wonderful. And I'm lucky. I have three grandchildren. They're now 5, 7, and 9. And it's there's nothing as fascinating as a child's mind developing.
Mm.
Watching them learning new things, watching the little ideas that come sparking out of these little heads. And I'm a long distance grandparent myself. My grandchildren live about 400 miles away, so I don't see them as often as I'd like, but when I do, it's just uh, so much fun.
Because when you're in the trenches as a new parent, you don't often see these big changes within your children because you see them daily. But I imagine, like for
Right.
yourself, when you're a grandparent from a distance, seeing them from time to time, you would really
Yes.
notice these amazing changes.
You really notice the changes, and it's just a privilege to get to watch these little people become bigger people and grow into themselves and learn about
Yes.
them and get to know them.
Do you notice elements of your own children, and can you see that in your grandchildren? What parts
It's
of
funny.
personality?
I don't look for that as much as some people do. I every once in a while there will be something that I notice that is reminds me of my son. But to be honest with you, granddaughters especially are so much like their mother that it's a little harder to see my side of the family in there.
And you gave the advice, you told me about the advice that you received much earlier on about the grandparent vision statement, that
Yeah. Yeah.
big verbose title. Um, is that the best advice you've ever received, or is there something else that sticks out in your mind?
That I think you might be right that really has helped me to know where I'm going as a grandparent. It's helped me stop me from buying things because I'm like, wait a minute, this does not fulfill my purpose as a grandparent. That's really cute, but I'm going to pass that up because it really doesn't add anything to my experience as a grandparent. It
Mm.
scratches that shopping itch, but there are better ways to do that than foisting stuff upon my son and his wife.
That's it. There is so much stuff, isn't there?
There is so much stuff, and that's another thing that makes it really hard. It's so cheap to buy things, and that's we're being bombarded with that all the time. Um, Yeah, so it takes a lot of self-discipline to walk out of a store with empty hands when it's all displayed. And I
Mm.
swear they do it just to get to grandmothers sometimes because there there are stores that I hear there are gift stores here that I call grandmother stores because they're just so enticingly displayed,
Yeah.
things that you should buy your grandchildren. And
Mm.
I can't say that I have 100% record of walking out empty-handed, but I really do
You do.
try.
I'd be very surprised. I would even call you out and say, "No, you're not telling the truth on that."
No, no.
Yeah. So, Dee, what is your very favorite thing about being a grandmother?
Well, seeing my son as a parent,
Mm.
but just seeing my family grow. I mean, just seeing the love and having these new people and seeing the way they interact with their aunts and with, just watching the family grow is so gratifying.
Yeah, yeah, it would be. It would be. Right. So, fine. But we'll just have a couple of wrap up questions now. Away from being a grandparent and that role that's so encompassing because it is part of your personal life as well as your professional life is this area.
Right, right.
Doing all of that. What else are you looking forward to in this second half of life?
Travel,
Where
travel.
to?
Well, I'm going to come visit you at some point. That is
Brilliant.
definitely.
Good. Australia is a
No,
fabulous place.
and there are a lot of parts of the United States that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
I love Europe. I want to keep going back to Europe.
Mm.
My husband and I lived in Japan for a few years when he was in the military, and I would love to go back there. So, lots of places, but it isn't even how far or whether it's a place I've seen before or not. I just love experiencing new things. So
Yes.
it can be, the next town over.
Yes. And what do you love about this stage of life? Is there something particular that go, oh my God, I'm so enthralled with this?
I, I am not worried about anybody's opinion anymore. And it's just so freeing to have a level of confidence that I certainly
Mm.
never had growing up, and I certainly did not have in my 20s or 30s or even 40s. And I really, just the fact that I'm on social media, my face is everywhere. I mean, that is something that I would never have predicted for myself. And it's very freeing to know that the only opinions that matter are mine and my family's.
Yeah, that's right. Well done. I love that answer. Good. Finally, Dee, what do you hope that your 80-year-old self is going to say about current day Dee?
Oh, I hope she looks back and is really proud of the impact that she has had on other families, because that is what really has been so wonderful about this for
Mm.
me now. And
Yeah.
I hope that she also knows that her family has enjoyed what she has done for them and is still a strong unit and still is looking out for each other.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great answer. So thank you so much for joining us today, DeeDee. It has been an absolute cracker of a conversation, and I'm sure it's going to help so many women out there. So if you think, as a listener, that you know somebody who would love and benefit from hearing this episode, just make sure that you share it with them. And you can also find more information about DeeDee and her work by going to the show notes. So until next time, thank you, DeeDee, and everyone, take care. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. And remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it, and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Joe Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joeclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.